With all due deference to anyone with the immense amount of talent required to make it to the NFL, in a relative sense there have been some terrible teams in NFL history, a fact we've covered before. Many of these teams have received their share of long-lasting infamy, but many others have slipped under the radar. They may not have been completely forgotten, but perhaps the depths to which they sank have. Today, we're going to be counting down 15 forgotten terrible teams of the Super Bowl era, listing them from highest to lowest according to their C-score, a metric created by this channel to evaluate all teams of the Super Bowl era that takes a look at the total team, not just its record. For a deeper explanation of C-score, be sure to check out the description of this video. Just as we did with our forgotten great teams, we have 3 qualifications to make this list. The team cannot have earned the number 1 pick in the following season's draft, their C-score must be worse than -20, and they can't be too well known, such as the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's time to pull back the curtain on these teams. We begin with the 2006 San Francisco 49ers. Even though they found their way to a 7-9 record, just 1 win away from being 500, this was still a very bad team. They finished 3rd in a less than stellar NFC West, but their numbers were worse than even the last place Arizona Cardinals. They were outscored by 114 points, thanks in large part to allowing more points than any other team in the league. Playing against a weak schedule, they only managed a C-score of -20.198. It's that 7-9 record and not even obtaining a top 10 pick in the draft that obscures how bad this 49ers team was. The only game they won by more than 10 points was at home against the even more atrocious Oakland Raiders, while taking 3 losses by at least 29 points. The 04 team grabbed the number 1 overall pick, while the 05 team has plenty of infamy attached to it, especially offensively, thanks in large part to Football Outsiders. But this team's overall performance isn't too far away from those, and won't be given a pass just because they were able to squeeze off a 5-3 record in 1-possession games. We've got a trickier entry next because of the season in which it took place, with the 1987 Kansas City Chiefs. In just a 15-game schedule, the Chiefs went 4-11, finishing last place in the AFC West. They were weak offensively, but they were even weaker defensively, allowing the 2nd most points in the league and ending with a -115 point differential. A middle-of-the-road schedule helped some, leaving KC with a C-score of -20.291. Not only was 1 game canceled in 1987 due to a player strike, but 3 games were played with replacement players. While it is true that the Chiefs went 0-3 in those replacement games, once the real players came back in full force, they still lost 5 straight games, including 3 straight games at home. The fact is, 1987 itself is somewhat glossed over beyond the strike itself and the Super Bowl. But like any other season, there was some avert your eyes football being played, and KC was part of that class. And when one thinks upon bad Chiefs teams, this one would rarely come to mind. We've got, America's team coming up next with the 2002 Dallas Cowboys. This was the 3rd of 3 consecutive 5-11 seasons, the calling card of the Dave Campo era. This was the worst of the bunch though, finishing last in the NFC East despite a reasonably decent performance on defense. However, against the league's 3rd easiest schedule, they were still the league's 2nd lowest scoring team, ending with a C-score of -21.204. The 21st century hasn't been kind to Jerry Jones's bunch, and the fact that they haven't made it to an NFC Championship game since 1995 is widely known. But this team sunk a lot lower than many may realize, due in part to finishing with that same 5-11 record as they had the previous 2 seasons. All 5 of those wins were by a single possession, and 6 different times they failed to score more than 10 points. The 1989 team was the worst that the Cowboys ever put out by C-score, but it may surprise that this 2002 team was the second worst. Even worse than the 3-13 season in 1988 that got Tom Landry fired. Leaving the 21st century by just a little bit finds us in the domain of the 1997 Chicago Bears. Their 4-12 record can be explained away to a degree, given that every other team in the NFC Central finished with a winning record, signified by that second hardest strength of schedule. But they went 3-5 outside the division, finishing in the bottom 3 in both points scored and points allowed, for a point differential of -158 and a C-score of -22.286. The Bears opened the season 0-7 and 1-10, with that one win coming in overtime, albeit on the road against the solid Dolphins team. This season came right about in the middle of a 6-year playoff drought for Chicago, but only their 2000 season came close to this one in C-score, and even that was more than 5 points away. There just wasn't anything memorable about this group. They were bad, but not historically bad. They may have had a few, "oh yeah, I remember that guy" players, but outside of total junkies and Bears fans, many would be hard-pressed to provide any real details about this team. Except for 1999, the 1990s were a graveyard for the Rams franchise, and their second to last season before the move to St. Louis in 1993 was no exception. This season in Los Angeles provided a 5-11 record, but that masks a lot of issues, including bottom 4 finishes in points scored and points allowed, bringing forth a -146 point differential. Their strength of schedule helps, but not enough, leaving them with a C-score of -22.626. A 5-11 record can sometimes be enough to spare a team last place in the division, but the Rams weren't so lucky. It was in the previous season where Rams relocation rumors started. With the Raiders still in town and the Rams actually playing their home games in Anaheim, attendance was sparse this season. They cleared 75% capacity only one time, and that was against the in-state, top-of-the-line 49ers on a holiday weekend. Yeah, there were a lot of Niners fans in the house. This season is kinda like the second to last episode of a bad TV show, which, unless you're Game of Thrones, doesn't stick long in the memory. This was the rookie season in the NFL for the current head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes. Here we have the 1989 Atlanta Falcons, finding their way to a 3-13 record despite being outscored by 158 points. That Colorado dude didn't really help the defensive cause in this season, as no one allowed more points than Atlanta. They played a top 5 schedule, but their C-score was still on the lower side at -24.11. Yes, we're being coy here. Obviously, we are referencing Deion Sanders, who has a case as the greatest cornerback in NFL history, certainly as a pure cover corner. Deion wasn't awful as a rookie, taking the ball away 6 times, but he was still more mid-afternoon than primetime at this point. Deion's presence was far and away the on-field highlight for Atlanta, but it must be said that 2 highly unfortunate tragedies late in the season defined the Falcons off the field. There is nothing football-related that can ever come close to that kind of significance, so in that sense, it might be better that this team be less forgotten. We travel back 4 seasons to 1985, where we find the St. Louis Cardinals. 3 seasons before their move to the desert, St. Louis put up a 5-11 record while getting outscored by 133 points. They finished last place in the slightly less rugged than usual NFC East, explaining their strength of schedule, sitting at a lowly 25th out of 28 teams. The defense performed slightly better than the offense, with the second lowest scoring team in the league notching a C-score of -24.284. With their impending move to Phoenix, their general struggles in St. Louis, and the giant shadow cast over the 1985 season by the Chicago Bears, this might feel like any old run-of-the-mill season for the Cardinals. They won their first game by 3 points though, and started the season 3-1. That 3-point win was their only game all season decided by 1 possession. Their closest loss on the year was by 10 points on 3 different occasions. And despite clearing 27 points 4 times and clearing 41 points twice, they still found a way to score fewer points than anyone else other than the truly pitiful Buffalo Bills. The Green Bay Packers kicked off the Super Bowl era with consecutive championships and have won quite a lot over the past 30-some years. But there was quite a bit of bad in between, including this 1986 team. 4-12 looks like an overachievement, given that negative 164 point differential and bottom 4 finishes in both points scored and points allowed. They were spared last place in the NFC Central by the Buccaneers, but still finished with a dreadful C-score of negative 24.69. As far as C-score goes, this is the single worst Packer team of the entire Super Bowl era. The only other franchise to never drop below negative 25 in any one season is the Baltimore Ravens, and they've only officially been around since 1996. So in the grander historical context, this team isn't truly that bad. Reality tells us otherwise. The most memorable thing that happened to the Packers this season is when defensive lineman Charles Martin intentionally injured Bears quarterback Jim McMahon late in the season, knocking him out for the year. It was certainly Martin's career highlights. We now return to the 21st century. In fact, we have this list's most recent team in the 2017 Indianapolis Colts. The Colts were a seesaw after Peyton Manning's departure, and this was one of the lower points, going 4-12 while being outscored by 141 points. Missing Andrew Luck explains the 30th place finish in points scored, but does nothing to explain the 30th place finish in points allowed, dropping this team to a C-score of negative 25.001. Indy swept the Houston Texans this season, which got them out of last place in the AFC South. That's about the only good thing to say about this group. But if the subject of terrible Colts seasons over the past 15 seasons ever comes up in conversation, 2011 almost always tops the list before taking the second and third spots as well. It's tough to say that a team with a sub-negative 25 C-score actually lives in the shadow of another team, but this team found a way to do it. That they bounced back the following season and won a playoff game shunts the 2017 Colts even further into the shadows. This is now our 10th team out of 15, the 1980 New York Giants. They racked up a 4-12 record and a last place finish in the NFC East, highlighted by an 8-game losing streak and resulting in a negative 176 point differential, exactly 11 points per game. They did play a top 3 schedule, but they were bottom 3 in both points scored and in points allowed. Their C-score plummets to negative 25.099. New York Giants fans will remember the 1980 season as the one that brought them Lawrence Taylor in the following season's draft. As for what actually happened on the field, that's something they'd like to forget. It was actually pretty simple for this group. They went 4-0 when they scored at least 27 points, and they went 0-12 when they failed to score at least 27 points. 7 different times they failed to hit double digits, including 5 times in a 6-game stretch. The Giants have certainly had lots of bad seasons in the Super Bowl era, going back to that very first season, but the specifics behind this one fly a little bit under the radar. We begin the reveal of our final 5 teams with the only franchise to appear on this list twice, but from 2 different cities. These are the 2011 St. Louis Rams. Now a decade removed from their last Super Bowl appearance, this group went 2-14 with a ghastly negative 214 point differential, nicely lining up with that record. The NFC West was out of the doldrums beginning with this season, but St. Louis did not come along, registering a C-score of negative 27.605. Indeed, the Rams played the league's hardest schedule, slightly justifying their status as the league's lowest scoring team. What gets this team on this list is that period of time between 2007 and 2009, which by C-score is the worst 3-year stretch in the entire Super Bowl era. They were also the worst team by C-score in each of those seasons. Yes, even worse than the winless 2008 Lions. Moreover, the Rams shared this 2011 season with the aforementioned Peyton Manning-less Colts. In the larger picture, this was a miserable year, not just your standard bad one. But in this context, standard bad is just how it felt. One of the more memorable seasons in NFL history took place in 1984, but not so much for the Minnesota Vikings. They turned out a 3-13 record, and they did so on the wrong end of the scoreboard to the tune of negative 208 points. The Purple People Eaters no more. They were dead last in points allowed, while still finishing bottom 5 in points scored. The league's hardest schedule doesn't save them from a C-score of negative 27.814. Vikings fans won't like to hear this name, Les Steckel. Legendary head coach Bud Grant retired after the 1983 season, putting Steckel in the big chair. Steckel only remained for this 1984 season before Bud Grant had to come back in 1985. That much is known, but the depths to which this Vikings team sank still needs dissemination. They started the year 2-2, with both wins coming by a single possession. They ended the year 1-11, with that win also coming by one possession. Their 3 wins were by a total of 11 points. They lost 7 individual games by at least that much. Yet they were only 1984's 3rd worst team by C-score. Thank the Oilers and the Bills for that. We looked at the New Orleans Saints twice in our best forgotten teams. Now we gotta look at them for the worst. This is the 1999 team, which only managed a 3-13 record in an NFC West where 5-11 was good for 3rd place out of 5 teams. They were outscored by 174 points and were in the bottom 10 for every category we have listed here. We break the negative 30 point C-score barrier with this group coming in at negative 30.394. These Saints are certainly memorable, but that's almost entirely based on what happened off the field. It was in the draft where head coach Mike Ditka famously traded away all his picks that season, 2 more the next season, along with a partridge and a pear tree. Then we had this photo. And then of course we had this photo. Oh my. We know the season went poorly and that Ditka was fired at the end of it. But how poorly? In a nutshell, they went winless on the road. They gave the reborn Cleveland Browns their first victory, in New Orleans no less, and during one 5-game stretch, they were outscored 180-69. Even a literal hurricane that sent them away from their home for an entire year didn't produce a season this bad. In a sea of losing seasons, we get this particular gem from the San Diego Chargers in 1973. They went 2-11-1 and were firmly rooted to the bottom of an otherwise competitive AFC West. That gave them a high-level strength of schedule, but they were still outscored on the season by nearly 200 points, with bottom 3 marks in points scored and in points allowed. That left them with a C-score of negative 31.794. It wasn't until 1978 that the Chargers had their first post-merger winning season, although they were 500 in 1977. This was after landing a winning record in every single AFL season except for one, which they responded to by winning the AFL Championship. 1973 was right smack dab in the middle of 7 straight losing records, all of which seemed to have consolidated into a single morass of suffering, but it was the worst of the bunch. This team's most notable accomplishment was their ill-fated trade for a 40-year-old Johnny Unitas, and he was just as bad on the field that year as the whole rest of the team was. Last man up, our 15th and final team is the 1976 New York Jets. Either through luck, sheer willpower, or Bugs Bunny-like directions given to the opposing team's bus driver, this team actually won 3 games in 14 tries, all while getting outscored on the year by 211 points. They were 3rd worst in scoring, 3rd worst in points allowed, and worst as far as this list goes with their C-score of negative 35.552. So how does a team this bad get away without any long-lasting shame? Well, they had the pleasure of sharing the 1976 season with 2 expansion teams, the Seattle Seahawks and the winless Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both of whom had the pleasure of making our list for the 10 worst single-season teams in NFL history. That'll take up most of the headlines for awful football. Furthermore, the Jets avoided last place in the AFC East by beating the Buccaneers and sweeping the Buffalo Bills, who finished the year 2-12. That means the Jets' 3 victories this season came against teams that combined for a 2-23 record against the rest of the league, while the Jets themselves went 0-11 against the rest of the league. In those 11 games, the Jets scored 99 points and allowed 357. Their closest loss was by 11 points. The average score was 32.5-9. The NFL's worst team that nobody really remembers. Thank you so much for getting this far into the video. Do the whole YouTube thing if it so moves you. Like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and ding that bell so that you may be notified every time we release something new. Let me know what you think about all of this. Just like in our video of the 15 forgotten great teams of the Super Bowl era, I certainly left somebody out of this one, because there are so many more than just 15 teams that fit the criteria. Also, like that previous video, the negative 20 C-score cutoff is essentially arbitrary, so let us know in the comments section about anybody else you would have included. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this matter or anything else you may have on your mind. Thank you once again for joining us today, and until next time, I hope you have an awesome day.